Good morning. We are live. Chair, if you want to begin the meeting. Good morning, Chair. We are now live.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies. My internet connection was giving me a bit hard time, but I guess now it's all good. Everyone can hear? Thank you. Okay, so we are going to begin if everything is fine with everyone. Good morning and welcome to our virtual board meeting. As we continue to hold virtual meetings, there are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. We are streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up.
Ron, I think we lost you.
Unfortunately, he lives in Brampton, so I can't blame the internet. Maybe the vice chair could take over until Ron's back on.
I don't know if he's got the notes though. Okay, just give him a second. He'll probably try and log back on.
Hey, Ron, you're back on.
Yeah, Ron, you're back on, but you'll have to take your mute off, Ron, please. Ron, your mute's on, Chair. There you go.
My apologies. I just secured through my phone, so I guess I should not have any more problems. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin using the link previously provided, as I just did. We will begin today with the Section 10 Caledon OPP meeting. Welcome, Inspector Garrett. I hope all is well with you and the Caledon OPP. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Each of you have the first quarter for 2020 report from the Caledon OPP. I can go through it if you wish, or if you have any specific questions relating to the report, I can answer those. So would you like me to go through item by item, or do you want to just acknowledge that you have a copy, sir?
We do have the copies. You can proceed.
Okay. So going through the first quarter from 2020, page by page. So public complaints, we've received 3. Motor vehicle collisions, we're down 16.2% in the amount of collisions
Board meeting
from this time last year. Criminal code and provincial statute charges laid. We are actually we've laid 43.
Sorry, sorry, Inspector Mercrombie. Yes, I figured. I guess just if we need to go, I just want to reconfirm with the executive director. Should I call item by item, like from item number 1 and item number 2, or the way Inspector is proceeding? That's fine.
He's going through his report. He can go through the report, and then we'll have to go back through the to pass the minutes from the last meeting. But we can do that after the inspector is done with his presentation.
Okay, sure. Please proceed, Inspector.
Thank you, Chair. So the first quarter of 2020, our criminal code and provincial statute charges are up by 43.2%. Violent crime are down 6.2% from this period, same period last year. Property crime is down 13.4%. Drug crime is listed as 200% increase. This is due to an aggressive investigative follow-up with our Criminal Investigation Bureau for overdose deaths caused by opiates, and we're doing combined investigations tracking down the seller of the opiates. So this has increased our proactive drug investigations. That's why there's a 200% increase. Clearance rates. Well, you can see that the difference is 1.2% from this period last year. So that's a quick skim of the quarter report. If you have any specific questions of any of those areas, please feel free to ask.
Would you like a motion, Mr. Chairman, to accept the report?
I guess we have the next items over there. We will be asking. So we can accept the reports at that time, I believe.
Okay.
So we will now refer, obviously, the roll call. All members present. Any declaration of conflict? Seeing none. The first item will be the approval of the minutes from the meeting held Friday, February 28, 2020. May I have a mover? By Mr. Barton, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Is there any question or comment for Inspector Grant with the request with respect to the 2020 first quarter report? Any question? Mr. Howell?
Inspector, I noticed there's a significant decrease in your criminal code non-traffic. I would assume that's largely due to COVID and lack of activity in the area.
So for the criminal code non-traffic, that's
I see a 50% decrease in charges.
Yeah, that's the one area down, and that attributes to impaired driving charges. And the COVID numbers aren't really going to be reflective on the first quarter. That'll really be reflective on the second quarter report, the next one we do. So I did not actually break down the actual cause or reasons of that one, but I can get back to you on that, sir.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then I would like to receive the report. May I have a mover? Mr. Bachan, seconded by Mayor Brown. All in favor? Carried. This concludes section 10, Caledon OPP agenda. Thank you, Inspector, for taking the time and for attending.
Thank you, Chair.
We will now begin with the Peel Police Service Board meeting of June 26, 2020. Again, roll call. All members present. Yes. Are there any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we will continue with the meeting. Chief, given everything that you have that has happened since our last meeting, I thought I would give you the opportunity to provide any comments you may have at this time.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, board members. And I appreciate the opportunity. I think one thing that the Chair, you and I have chatted about, and Mr. Serpe, is perhaps on the agenda at a future point, finding a natural place in footprint in the agenda for me to provide a verbal update as we begin. We know we've got a significant amount of things to discuss, but I would first like to acknowledge that notwithstanding that you have given me an opportunity to speak here at this board meeting, that myself, my leadership team, and you as a board have been in constant contact during the week and the last several weeks, nonetheless, with, of course, many factors occurring, not just internationally, but right here locally in our community. And That being said, I just want to first acknowledge that this has been a difficult time for members of our public, our local community, our racialized communities that have been specifically affected. And I also want to say that it has affected the remarkable 3,100 members of our organization. I think we would all agree that some of the outcomes, not just the loss of life in tragic motor vehicle collisions, but some of the critical incidents have really brought the attention of the world really to policing. And we know that. But behind the scenes, 24/7, there are men and women that have a real heart for the community and doing the right thing. And nonetheless, it has a pressure on them as well as the public. And I need to acknowledge that there are, our people put on their uniforms, they come to work or they pick up the phones behind the scenes day in and day out. And they are brothers, sisters, coaches, people in the community, volunteers. They themselves are racialized. As you know, we're a diverse community, and we are, a page out of that community. And the many confluence of factors that are affecting us all right now impact us. So I just want to please acknowledge the men and women of our organization, that they are remarkable. We continue to be proud of the work they do, and are thankful for their willingness during remarkable times to be flexible, to be patient, but also to demonstrate a willingness to listen to. So I, as the chief, have to lead that with my management team. And as you know, we've been doing a significant amount of consultations with various stakeholders in the community, listening, being sensitive to it. And despite that, you as a board 9 months ago had me come to this organization. We have, since the last board meeting, seen a lot of change, and not only with the appointment of deputy chiefs, but other senior officers within the ranks, almost about 50 new promotions in the last several months, which is a new face to the leadership of this organization. And that is not on its own. We have on June 1st commenced a new entire reorg of the entire service, which institutionalizes the footprint of some of the themes. And the themes, right from the day I spoke to you in my interview till the day we walked into the halls of this organization, have been focused on people. That's the people within the service and our community. The second piece is also a commitment to really get modernized with our approach to community policing and getting upstream to mitigate risk, which is a theme I know will come up several times in our board meeting today, is how can we do things differently so that we aren't everything for everyone, and that the appropriate systems in our community and across communities mitigate risk before we are in crisis. But the other piece is also to see innovation and technology be the hallmark of where we go. And that's just not about bright and shiny objects and things, and we'll get to some board reports that speak to that. It's talking about it being a platform for serving our community better. And so those have been institutionalized in the footprint of our organization. I had an opportunity to speak to regional council, as Chair Yanika and our mayors would know, and really walk our regional council and staff through not just the road traveled in 2019, but our current status and where we see pressures, not only during the pandemic, but our commitment to a way forward. And that is one which I wanted to highlight, and thank you, Chair Chadha, for creating the space for me to do that sort of out of sync, is just to ensure that, and to kind of put it on the record in the format where it would be the most critical, is at the Police Services Board level, is to know that the Police Services Board has been alongside and in every step with me and our team to create that. I want to thank the board for giving me a leadership team that, for being the second or third largest municipal police agency in Canada, the expectations are high upon us, that the community has high expectations. Our people are great, and we have a vision of forward, and we're going to achieve that. And before I also have a quick other verbal update, Raluca, I'm wondering if you could provide me with the ability to host the screen. I did share a video with Regional Council yesterday, and for the Police Services Board, we know that we have immediate pressures that we need to deal with. We have community concerns, our members need to be supported, our service delivery has to be sensitive to the needs of the community and evolve. We need to continue to be responsible to what we do. But I also have a way forward that I am committed to, and this organization is going to move that way. My role also is to not only lead internally, but make sure that the public knows where we're headed. In the next week or two, we will be issuing a real fulsome roadmap, which you have seen. Parts of it are the community safety wellbeing model that's being operationalized, the new development of a community safety wellbeing bureau and branch, which has been now put into the frontline policing operations, which Deputy Andrews holds. Our Deputy Patrick is now leading our training and development program, which is going to be a fulsome element to weave in our CCDI and EDI outcomes. Deputy Milinovich is going to be leading our work on vulnerable populations such as intimate partner violence and our heavy gang response strategy that's going to be upstream. And of course, a brand new innovation and technology command element that Deputy Oduardo is leading. So with that, if you would indulge me just for a moment, and this might not have been anticipated, but I would like to share with you one piece of our external communication. And it doesn't go into unpacking our efforts on a human rights approach, which we know the City of Toronto and the board are considering. I'll be the first to say that we do and have a real way forward. I think the public is not just looking for chiefs and leaders to say we want to change, they want to see that change. And I and you would know as a board that there is a plan that involves both the board having accountability, governance, and oversight over some key activities, but just wanted to seed the first communication piece with you as it relates to that.
Sure, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Chief. You should be able to screen share now. Please let me know if you have any issues.
Sure. Are you able to see the video, static video screen?
Yes.
Okay.
The volume, is everyone?
There's no
hearing?
sound, no sound.
Yeah. Maybe we need to increase the volume a bit.
Absolutely.
We want to hear you, Chief. Just
Yeah,
don't want to watch the video.
Can you hear me talk?
Yeah, we can hear you talk.
Okay. I have a support staff here. Oh, let me try this. Let me know if you can hear it.
Unless you remember whatever you said in the video, you can just say that again while video is playing at the back.
Where's the sound coming from?
Again, no sound, Chief.
I think you might need to switch away from the Jabber speakers to your regular speakers.
Yeah. Okay. Chair Chada, maybe perhaps we'll see if we can get the video at another time. But
Sure.
an opportunity just to share with you a communication piece. I can clearly circulate it with the board, but I'll see if, as the agenda proceeds, if my IT staff can help me. Where's Deputy O'Doherty? Don't you have innovation technology? Can't you help me with this? At any rate, I think yesterday was an opportunity for me to speak very openly to regional council, but to expose the heart of where we're headed. We know that there's been a lot of discussion as it pertains to the defund movement, and we know there are many heartfelt delegations that are before us today. I think maybe it's an opportunity for the chief to speak to this, is that notwithstanding what the complications are of turning one tap on and one tap off in terms of funding, is the spirit of what people are saying is we need to bolster other systems that can come around first responders or those that do the crisis work, so that we can mitigate risk before we get to it. And it's not just about that. We're talking about being thoughtful on how we can really have outcomes that are meaningful. And I would be the first to say, I've had many interviews, I know on CBC, Global, CTV, at every opportunity to say every chief in this country, and I would say all of our members would endorse an alternative for us to be doing things that we're not the professionals at. And inclusive of that is, addictions, mental health, homelessness, the many, responsibilities that our officers see on a day in and day out basis. And what I'd like to do is focus on the fact that the way forward is already oriented to some systems that we are doing with, are bringing to this organization and doing in our community. And that, of course, is rooted in community safety well-being planning, where other areas such as risk mitigation, prevention, and social development are the focus. I would advocate for a pro-public health approach, but also remind the board and the public that there are some real public safety issues that we are still responsible for, that require the men and women of this organization in a real complex environment, whether it be gun and gang violence to human trafficking, organized crime, that we are the ones continually evolving how we respond to those services. And if there are opportunities for other systems to take off our plate, some of the pressures that we see, we are wholeheartedly and have always been advocating for that. We have meaningful work in that area that we can still do and look to those discussions. And in the interim, we continue to do our best. There is a space in between, which is always one which we can look at finding opportunities to bolster and enhance. As you know, this year, from a crisis response standpoint, we've endeavored to embark on some real new initiatives within our region. And as my team would agree, there are opportunities moving forward to do the same. So with that, I think I wanted to just acknowledge that it has been a difficult time. We know that there are more discussions in this board meeting and outside of the board meeting that we will continue to have. You have the commitment of this organization to really move forward. We have challenges in between, but with the team that we have right from the front line to us, and I just say that from the front line to us, is that if you look at this organization as a pyramid, traditionally has been, the front line is the base, and we work our way to the top. Our goal is to invert that so that, everything we do, right from myself to my team, is oriented towards the people. And, we're embarking on that. And I want to thank the board for continuing to be with us during that time and give us the resources, allow us to be able to do that. As you can see, some of the key activities in this board reports are going to help us achieve that. And with that, Chair Chada, I do want to say very briefly that Deputy Chief Milinovich had a quick verbal update before we proceed with the agenda, and not to belabor it much more.
Sure, Deputy, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, and on the heels of some of the discussion that the chief highlighted, I wanted to provide a quick update and almost a fresh face perspective on some of the things that Regional Investigative Services is working on. I do believe that they are very relevant. And generally speaking, they revolve around two priorities. Last year was a tough year. 2019, we had just over 31 homicides. Half of them were related to domestic intimate partner violence, and the other half was gun and gang violence, where in addition to that, we had roughly over 700 rounds fired in the region. So I wanted to provide an update in our involvement there, and what I can tell you is there is an incredibly hardworking team that has initiated an analysis and really starting to build a very comprehensive response strategy to addressing those two issues. This would be inclusive of the creation of a domestic violence and intimate partner violence centralized unit to complement all of the efforts that we do have currently ongoing in that area, but also to align that with the work in community safety and well-being planning that's being done by the region, as they have selected that as a priority. On the guns and gangs front, we're going to collapse and reorganize some of the current bureaus and resources that we do have to really begin doubling down on the investigative piece there. Again, an incredibly impressive team, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to make an impact not only from an investigative perspective and begin addressing some of that crime, which quite honestly, again, with that fresh perspective, I can tell you at times it's concerning and shocking. Not only does it affect the people that live in that lifestyle, but innocent victims and people that are caught in the crossfire. So it's definitely something that we're going to invest in from an investigative perspective. But we also recognize that that can't be the only answer. We need to, excuse me, we need to make sure that we invest in youth and the preventative piece, the social development piece, and we need to prevent our youth from becoming involved in that lifestyle. So very quickly at a high level, that's the direction that investigative services is moving towards. And I would like to reassure the board and tell you confidently that I do believe we are going to have an impact and it will be the way forward. And aside from that, thank you for having me here to be a part of this. There's some incredible opportunities that we're just about to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And with that, Chair Chadha, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, the first item will be the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, May 29, 2020. Any question, comment? Saying none, may I have a mover to move these minutes? Mr. Atia, seconded by Mr. Yanika. All in favor? Approved. Now we move on to consent agenda. In accordance with the board's procedure policy, we will now move to the motion for the consent agenda. The consent agenda deals with the item considered routine. Do any member wish to remove any item from consent?
Chairman, I wonder if you may just go one by one and because I read this a week ago. Let's just go one by one so I can refresh, and then you can call out the number and we'll wave at you if we want it held. How's that?
Rob, you want to read items?
Sure, I can read the items if you'd like, Chair.
Please do.
Sure. So the first item in consent is item number 3. It's the 2020 current capital and reserve financial report.
Any question, comment on this one? Any board member?
Okay.
Would like to remove any item we will be removing, we'll consider under new business. If not, then it will just remain as a routine consent agenda. The next item, Rob?
So 3 will remain in consent. Number 4 is the 2019 annual procurement activity report. And that will stay in consent. Number 5 is the 2019 Peel Police Services Board Community Support and Recognition Fund.
That will remain in consent.
Number 6 is the 2019 Persons at Risk Annual Report.
You know, Mr. Chair, I wonder, maybe we should hold this one. Might be worth talking about, and the trends, and particularly with respect to domestic violence, youth crime, etc. So why don't we spend a minute on
Sure.
this one? So we can, after we pass the consent agenda, maybe we can come back to it.
Sure,
Okay.
we will consider under a new business, so we'll hold this item.
So a lot there. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem. Rob, please continue.
Sure. Number 7 is the 2019 Corporate Risk Management Annual Public Report. That will stay in consent. And number 8 is the 2019 Equal Opportunity Plan. And that'll stay in consent. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, so accept that item number 6, I believe. Can I have a motion to approve from item number 3 to item number 8, accept item 6? Motion by Mr. Boughton, seconded by Mr. Howell, all in favor. This is approved. And now we can talk about the new business item, which is item number 6.
Mr. Chair, it's Mayor Crombie. I just wonder if Nick might walk us through some of the findings and talk about trends and if they're going in the right direction, and what more can be done and should be done.
Deputy Milanovic.
Thank you, Chair. And Your Worship, I would be happy to do that. As you can see, this is an incredibly important and comprehensive report. It does deal with really the reality of things that are happening for some priority populations within our community. And, you know, at a very high level, what I would draw your attention to are some of the areas within the report where we are seeing what I would call significant increases. And then again, I'll couple that with what our plans and strategies are in addressing them, and maybe some discussion on where we could consider ourselves in 2020. So starting with obviously reported and really incidents of domestic and intimate partner violence. If you go to page 11, there's an overview of some of those incidents that's broken down not only by report, but also number of charges. So at the top of that page, you'll see intimate partner incidents and charges are up in 2019 by approximately 400 to 500 based on the category. So that's significant. And it's definitely something when you consider in the context of where we are today with COVID and, you know, forced isolation, we expect that we're going to see another increase and that we are trending towards. In fact, I can tell you that we do have an increase in those incidents for 2020. And again, for me, this highlights the need to pull together not only a centralized domestic violence and intimate partner unit within the Peel Regional Police Service, but to really solicit, include some of our community partners in how we respond. Because these are just reports that we're receiving. We also know that for a variety of reasons, at times people aren't reporting. And that's a problem because it's difficult to help when there is a crisis if they aren't reporting. So, you know, that's one area that I would draw the board's attention to. The other area that I think is also important and jumps out at me in terms of statistically significant increases are some of the reports that we're receiving by our Internet Child Exploitation Unit. Again, when we look at the number of unique images that are being categorized by the investigators in there, we're talking in the millions. And you'll see that there is a fairly substantial increase in the number of images and reports that they are receiving. And again, we're talking about really some vulnerability in the community. So what we're doing in response to that is we're enhancing our training. We're also enhancing our ability to triage some of those images so we can get through more. And then looking at, are our resources aligned in such a way that they reflect our priorities? And this is a theme that I believe that, the chief, when I first arrived, provided me some of those marching orders, which were with a fresh set of eyes, collect the data, and there's some very obvious priorities that he's established for us. Make sure that our resources are aligned in a way that we can really affect those priorities and start to make differences. So for myself, domestic intimate partner violence, but extending beyond that to some of the vulnerable or which should be priority populations in our community, some of which I've touched on through this report. But guns and gangs is also an issue. We need to make sure that we take a very thoughtful approach towards addressing the emergencies or the crisis type experiences that we have had in our community, but we also need to prevent them from occurring through that prevention piece and social development. So unless there were specific questions on the report, high level, broad strokes, there's some incredible work going on, but there's definitely opportunity to improve on that.
So Nick, I did just a couple questions. Yeah. Is that facial recognition technology being used to identify some of those individuals involved in the child abuse cases? Secondly, you may want to highlight also the elder abuse. Those numbers look very staggeringly high. And with respect to youth violence, those numbers don't seem to be declining either. So I don't know if you want to touch on those three things.
Absolutely, would happily do that. So in terms of identifying victims, there are a number of different really techniques that investigators would use, inclusive of things that, full disclosure, I don't even understand, because the level of technical ability from the investigators there is incredible. That's the arena that they live within. But I can tell you, it certainly would be within an investigative technique that they would consider. Facial recognition outside of that, that's a whole different story. And I can tell you, we haven't started down that path yet. I'm talking about facial recognition outside of victim identification for the purposes of really locating and rescuing the kids that are involved. But they are incredibly skilled and passionate about the work that they do. So they would use that and a variety of other techniques, I believe. Elder, definitely. The reason why I didn't highlight it is the substantial increase that you see there is generally a result of a change in coding. So originally they were included or grouped in a broader domestic category. But what we realized was by not grouping them more specifically based on their age, we were losing the opportunity to really develop a feel for what was happening. So that occurred at the end of, I believe it was 2018, which led to the substantial increase, or which represents a huge increase that is, when first, it's startling when you first look at it. I looked at that and asked the same question. But, nonetheless, despite the fact that we see the increase, one person from that population who suffers some of the things that I've been privy to through review of the investigations is too many. So while it's been relatively stable, aside from population increases and different things that would naturally create what you would expect be an increase, it's still too many. And then, I'm sorry, the last part that you wanted me to touch on, Your Worship?
Increasing youth violence and gangs. And also on the elder abuse, are you able to say whether or not you track it by demographic or cultural group or racial group at all? Is it any different distinctions, or is it pretty even across the board, no matter who you are, where you're from?
Specific to that question, I don't have that answer. I can easily find it out. I can tell you, I've asked the question in other areas, and it's really varied. And you know, if I'm not able to, I'm going to blame the information technology deputy, Anthony O'Doherty. I'm kidding. But I'd certainly be happy to find out and report back to the board. And then as it relates to youth violence, it is, so outside of the statistics that we have seen, it is trending up, especially when you begin to look at the type of offenses. You know, generally speaking, youth crime and some of those stats you'll see are declining, but what's concerning is the type of crime. I have, one of the first things I did was connect with one of the commanders or people in charge of our investigative units, that being drugs and guns and gangs, our intelligence side, but also our homicide commander. And, you know, got some very detailed briefing on some of the more high profile cases. And I can tell you, I was shocked by it. And the other thing that also shocked me was the age of some of the people that were involved. You know, it's not only shocking, but it's sad to see that we're losing some of our youth to those types of things that, quite honestly, without having had this position, I wouldn't even have known existed in Canada. So there is, and we've seen some of that in the news, some of the shootings and some of the gun and gang violence. And, you know, therein for me lies an opportunity. Again, not only to address the people that are involved in it, but we really need to start trying to win back our youth through some of the work that I know is being done by Deputy Andrews and our community safety and well-being team, and, you know, our youth officers and our beat officers. They're advocating for their sponsorship rather than letting them be lost to a life of gang culture.
Chair Chada, I just,
Yes.
if as a moment, if subject to what if the board has any more questions pertaining to this report, I just, as we proceed during the agenda, I just had one comment regarding the item 8 on the consent agenda, which was an equal opportunity plan report. I know that it was moved through as part of the consent agenda. I'm just wondering, given some of the discourse in the community regarding our efforts to have growth and opportunity and the work being done behind the scenes here in Peel Regional Police Service to make sure we not only have a strong workforce, but that we hire well, that we build resiliency in the front line. We've got Inspector Dirk Niles on the video call, who is recently promoted. He's one of our emergent leaders and had oversight over the recruiting bureau, and he's now in our corporate services training, learning and development, part of the roadmap forward to building a strong service. Perhaps there's an opportunity for him to just highlight by comments, not based on any questions, and I'll just offer that to you, Chair Chada.
Sure.
I think we should have held that report, Chief, for a walkthrough. So we can maybe pull it out of the consent so that we can review it. But I see that Len has had his hand up for some time on a question on this report too, Chair.
Mr. Howell, you want to?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie and Chair Chada. Yes, Deputy Chief, a couple things that I'd just like to clarify, if I could ask, regarding, I noticed on page 16, the drug offenses by youth has significantly fallen off since 215 to 219, from 172 to 10. And then on page 18, the adult charges have fallen off as well on drugs. I'd be curious if you could expand on that. And my other question would be, I know there's been a lot of questions about race-based statistics, and it's obviously a sensitive subject, but would there be any interest in covering that subject if it would be to protect the groups that feel they've been unfairly attacked in this, if we could show the charges against different protected groups and races, if that would make any difference. Do we have those statistics?
Through the chair, thank you, sir. To start with the question as it relates to youth and drug charges, the decline there would be connected to the change in legislation surrounding possession of cannabis, marijuana, and those types of things. That's my understanding, and that's why such a decline. In addition to that, you can also see in some of the data that we've collected, we're referring more rather than charging youth. Our referrals to diversion programs are up, which is a good thing as well, and I'm sure it has also played a role into that. And then as it relates to your second question in terms of demographics, again, it would be something that I could collect. I've started to dig into it, really specific to homicides and victims, and trying to build a picture of, again, where we need to invest our resources to better help people. But, you know, if there was a specific request, I'm sure I could collect it. But what I can tell you is, from my preliminary dive into some of the data, I'm very confident that it's, you know, it's comprehensive enough to provide us a good picture. And I know it would support the idea that, you know, our interest is really reflective of incident. And, you know, it wouldn't show any trends that weren't justified by really the investigations that we're undertaking. For example, you know, our homicide investigations very evenly distributed. You know, there are some slight trends in victim and accused, like almost, I want to say approximately 98% of our accused are male. I can give you the average age of victims in homicides, and they're kind of specific to the type of homicide that we're talking about. And it would, I could probably take up the next 2 hours walking through them, because they are unique demographics of people involved based on the type. And I would certainly be happy to provide a report or some additional information, but it would take some time.
And Nick, just Mr. Howell, just to top that up, you know, I think our efforts organizationally in this day and age, from having information, you know, we take hundreds of thousands of reports, we collect age, location, names of people. I think our view moving forward is understanding as much information as possible so we can identify risks and then orient services that are more appropriate to that, is really how we're looking at, I think, to your question about data, how it could be used, race-based data on collection. You know, that's the heart of it. You know, could it be used to look at where there's disproportionate contact? Perhaps, and you know, we don't have a real strong position in this day and age. You know, collecting information is something that happens on a daily basis. You know, you've all heard me say you know, when the movie Moneyball came out, in policing, we're 20 years after that, trying to get our business intelligence suite off the ground. At the moment, I think to Nick's point is, you know, our heart is to use it for understanding how do we be responsible for certain communities that are disproportionately affected. From an accountability piece, you know, we know that there's going to be some tough questions over time. At the moment, we work with the information we have, and I think fair to say, Nick, you haven't really deep dived into what's available at the moment. We are in a position really to have very fulsome information these days, Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Chief. I was also addressing a request by the Muslim Council of Canada that felt there was unfair treatment in the Muslim community. Perhaps the mayor could address it. I just thought that perhaps might appease some of their questions.
Okay, if we we are discussing item number 6. If some board members express that they'd like to hear the report for item number 8, I believe, equal opportunity plan. Mr. Randy Patrick, I guess if you can present that report.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move report 6.
Okay, so report 6 moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? I was going to do it joint, but anyway, since item number 8 is already approved, but Mr. Patrick, if you can please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as the Chief indicated, we have with us today Inspector Dirk Niles. Inspector Niles has just been transferred into our training bureau, but for the past year, he was in charge of our recruiting bureau, and it was that area that's responsible for this report. So I've invited him here today to give you some highlights of our equal opportunity report for 2019. So Inspector Niles.
Thank you, Deputy. Good morning, Chair Chata, mayors, members of the board. I'll just go through quickly some of the highlights of the report this year. For 2019, we had 1,922 applicants applying for the position of constable and cadet. We ended up hiring 123 for that program. There was a upswing in applications for racialized parties. We had 65% apply for those positions, 2.7% for Indigenous and 19% for female. A few other highlights: we expanded our outreach program, focusing on collaboration with the community, and held several outreach initiatives targeting fairs, community and festivals throughout the region. We partnered and hosted 9 general information sessions with universities. We held the Black Future Symposium, which targeted recruitment from the Black community. And we also, if you recall, back in August, conducted the Quebec recruitment campaign in response to Bill C-21, and that was highly successful. We had a total of 5,917 people visit our website in response to that campaign. And we began laying the groundwork for several new initiatives that we were going to be bringing forward into 2020. We initiated the Faces of Peel campaign, which is a community outreach initiative where we will be attracting underrepresented groups, racialized parties, and females to Peel Regional Police. We also began the Female Inclusion Team, which was a strategy focused on bringing women from the community into policing, focused on removing several barriers in testing, bringing them forward. And the last major initiative that we started towards the end of 2019 was the enhanced psychiatric testing for all new recruits. The minimum standard presently in the province is a test called the MMPI-2F, which measures a candidate's psychopathology and their likelihood to engage in antisocial behavior. Through discussions with Chief and Deputy Patrick, we realized that this testing alone was not meeting the pressures of the region, and we wanted to be attracting several of the best candidates from the community who have the resilience required and the cultural competence that's required to meet the demands of our region. So we added 3 new tests to the psychiatric portion of the recruitment process. The first test was the 16 personality factor test, and this test directly measures a candidate's ability to manage cultural competence and resiliency in policing. We also additioned a test that's called the MPulse. It's the Matrix Predictive Uniform Law Enforcement Survey, and this test measures a candidate's likelihood to engage in misconduct. For example, items that are tested for are misuse of a police cruiser, risk of discharging a firearm, excessive force, or racially and sexually offensive conduct, and the potential for a lawsuit. And the last test is called the Connors-Davidson Resiliency Test. And this test measures a candidate's ability to handle high-stress activities, both in immediate response and long-term. And this is critical to preventing any stress-related use of force scenarios. So after a candidate has completed all of those testings, they are then subject to a clinical interview, and we're provided with a full report. And today we've had a great deal of success with the psychometric testing that we've implemented, and we've been able to remove candidates from the process of hiring who may have certain vulnerabilities that would present risk down the road. And the last real benefit of the testing is we also get to see a complete personality of the individual, and we get a measurement on that person's openness, which will make them much more likely to adopt community and safety well-being strategies, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies, and most importantly, empathy towards our racialized community.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And Chair Chata and board members, as you can imagine, it's worth highlighting, and we'll clearly open it up for discussion or questions. But the efforts that Dirk has spoke to are above and beyond what is seen as the standards across Ontario. We do use a good solid foundation across the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police to endorse. But what Dirk has really highlighted, especially in the discussions about a focus on who is it that's a member of Peel Police and who is it that's serving the community. The volume of people that we're hiring based on attrition and going to the police college that we've been allocated as per the budget are they're the future. 30 years from now, 20 years from now, they'll be the ones leading this organization. And how diverse and complex the challenges we face are. So we're trying to think ahead to build that composition of people for the future. So thanks to Dirk, and we'd love to, and Deputy Patrick, clearly you can speak to it if you'd like to top that up. But if there are any questions, Mr. Howell.
Mr. Barton, your comment?
I spent some time with the chief discussing this a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the finance, and I can tell you from a business perspective, when we do the psychological testing of people coming in to our company and within the industry, the results are absolutely amazing. How they can peel the onion of that, on that person to see what the personality is like. With all that is happening with our force and across Canada, around the world, prevention, in other words, making sure that we don't bring somebody on the force that shouldn't be on there, is going to pay such huge dividends for us down the road by hiring the right people. And I can't tell you how great I think that this is. This absolutely works. And as I told the chief a couple of weeks ago, I was there, I went through this process 40 years ago. And if you read the report of me today and run my name out, you'd probably say, this looks like Al Bowden. It is an incredible tool that we should use to spend the money on that screening and the front end to make sure that the PRP, the people we put on the street, are the right people, have the right mindset, and can do the job. And the benefits of this are going to be incredible. So, Chief, to you and your team, Dirk, what you're doing, outstanding, and that's going to pay great benefits for us down the road. So, a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Just quickly, I want to make a quick comment. I was going through my timeline on social media, and it's exactly 1 year when we passed that motion regarding Quebec's Bill 21, and it's good to hear that good interest shown by people from Quebec. And thanks to this wonderful board, Mayor Brown and I put that motion exactly 1 year back, Mayor Brown, if you recall. And it's good to see that people recognize that, and Peel Police was the first organization in the country to brought that motion, and thanks to the entire board for supporting that. Mayor Brown?
I was just going to say that uptake, Randy, from our ads got in Quebec, I was really encouraged to hear that. Could you say that number again?
Yes, through the chair. That number, Mayor, was 5,917 people visited our campaign.
Wow. And do you know if any of those 5,917 applied for positions, started the process?
Yes, through the chair, it was 6 that we ended up receiving, yes. One of our challenges, Mayor, was language skills and equivalency for OPC. So we're working on a strategy, and we still have some follow-up to do with several people that are interested in actually coming through here.
Well, good one. Obviously we sent a very clear message that we're proud of our mosaic, and it doesn't matter what your faith is. Everyone deserves the opportunities to serve in public service. And obviously policing is a noble career where we want to welcome people from all walks of life. And so that's encouraging that we were able to have that reach. for those in Quebec that may not have known of Peel Region, more people do, and more people know the kind of community we are. And so thank you for that update. Just a pleasant surprise to hear that, and maybe more will follow and realize that this is a great place to live, work, and raise a family.
Exactly. Very well said, Mayor Brown, and thank you for the report. Back to Mr. Patrick. Would you like to add anything else on this, or?
No, just want to comment that, the work that Dirk's been doing, especially for the past year, it's going to show dividends into the future. There's some cost saving opportunities there as well. As far as people having the resiliency that's required for policing, therefore preventing potential, PTSD situations in the future. So that's one of the things we were looking at when we looked at the different types of testing that could be done for our candidates. I want to thank Dirk. He's done an excellent job, come a long way in just a year, and it's going to show dividends again in the future. So thanks, Dirk.
You're welcome, Deputy.
Okay, since the item has been already approved, now we can move on to the board member questions and announcements. So we'll now move. Do any member have any question or announcement? If so, please put your hand up. I know first Mr. Atia, and then Mr. Unica, then Mayor Crombie. I'm trying to look everybody on the screen, but okay, I have the order now. Mr. Atia first, and then Regional Chair Unica, then Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Chair Chada. 3 days ago, I had the opportunity to attend the funeral for Mr. Ijaz Chaudhry. I sat in the front lines and I witnessed so much pain that was not just reflective of the loss of his life, but growing hurt and disappointment for many residents of Peel. His wife and 4 children, the youngest, who was 7 years old, lost their father. His nephews, Hashim and Hassan, who spoke on behalf of the family and their extended family, lost a loved uncle. I wanted to take this opportunity to express the board's deepest condolences to the Chaudhry family, as well as the family of Dondre Campbell, for the tragic loss of his life, and the community is grieving along with them, as we all are grieving with them. To our police service members, I personally know that when tragic events like these take place, it impacts every one of you. You wake up every morning committed to serve and protect the families and communities in Peel, and each day you go home to your families who are part of these communities. We recognize the hard work and tremendous responsibility that you carry every day that you go to work, and we are grateful to your dedication. I believe we are in a broader moment that demands us to think about different and modern approaches to policing. We must not only do better for the families who have lost their loved ones, but for our own children. Since this board was appointed, we, along with Chief Nish, have viewed and embraced our mandate as one of pushing for and championing progress. I understand why there is anger and pain felt by the Chaudhry and Campbell families and the public from these tragic deaths that have highlighted issues that our board has long been exploring. I would like to thank the public and all those who have been advocating and supportive of our mandate. Your voices are being heard, and our board will continue to ask questions and will continue the work we began last year. I just wanted to share that, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Atia. Thank you for your comments. Now we move on to Regional Chair Unica. You want to say something?
Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up to my colleagues and those that are listening in, the members of the service as well. Yesterday, we had a marvelous session at Peel Regional Council, as Mayor Brown and Mayor Crombie know, with the chief who came in. We regularly have the chief in around budgeting time and just to give us an update on how things are going. And I just wanted the board and everybody to know that what is normally a half-hour, 45-minute exercise was almost 3 hours yesterday. just a marvelous discussion on the part of my colleagues around the table about where we were headed as a board, as a police services board. And I must say, and this is the main reason I wanted to speak to it, the chief just did a marvelous job of addressing what I think is the fundamental issue. With so much of this discussion today about the future of policing and what we should be doing, and shouldn't we be considering this, and other options upstream where the last resort isn't an officer and a gun. What the chief did, and we're so grateful for this, is explaining that this is not new to us and not a path that we're unaware of that we should be working towards. And so the chief's conversation yesterday, and also through our CAO at the region, Nancy Polzanelli, spoke to the initiatives that we've got in terms of community health and well-being and the wellness program that we're bringing into place that started 2 years ago. What can we do on other files to help people upstream, like CAMH and housing? Because if we don't address that, clearly you're going to have problems downstream. So for those, and it's all a matter of public record, it can be streamed afterwards, just a marvelous conversation where we can say to the community, we hear you, we're listening, we're on our way to implementing better ways of doing our job. So I hope the message is great, but do it better, do it faster, and let us be part of it. But it was just a marvelous piece on all of the initiatives this board and this chief have taken a year ago, 2 years ago, to get us on a better path in terms of community policing. So I wanted to stress that. The second point I wanted to make, Chair, was, and I deliberately wore my services jersey today because it honors the service, but it's also black, and we wear black in a time of mourning. I wanted to remind the board and our friends on the service and the region of Peel that last week we lost our very first police chief. Douglas Burrows served the region of Peel from 1974 to 1987 as our chief, and he passed away. And I'm reading back some of the eulogies of the day, was referred to as an officer and a gentleman. And what an appropriate way to be remembered and revered in his dedication to policing and all that he did. And what I wanted to do in honoring him, I wear the jersey in remembrance of his service and the passing of his life, but I also wear it today to honor the service that we have today, the 3,100 people that NISH speaks of, overwhelmingly who carry out the very best principles that Chief Burrows would have as well. And so I think the service needed to hear from us that we know they are doing their very best, they're adapting, they're learning, but at the end of the day, they've gotten into the service because they want to help and they are dedicated, and we honor their service as frontline people in the finest tradition of Chief Burrows, every chief that followed, and this chief today. Finally, and so thank you to Vice Chair to Atia. We also concluded in extending our condolences, the region of Peel, the mayors and I, to also carry on and extend our condolences to those in the modern day who have lost their lives in the region of Peel, Chowdhury, the DeAndre Campbell family, and others who were the victims of crime, vehicle mishaps that we're aware of as well. And so the council as well wanted to say we wanted to extend our condolences to all that have been affected. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Regional Chair Yanika. Now, Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the board for giving me this opportunity as well. And I wanted to respond to the chief earlier. I think these unprecedented times we're living in during COVID has really exposed some fault lines and some severe inequities in our community. And as a result, our community is in pain. We've seen the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Canada and the GTHA, and we're all trying to respond in the best way we can, whether calling out anti-Black racism, systemic racism, racism against Indigenous communities, Islamophobia as well, and calling it that, putting a label on it, and I think that begins the process of helping us address it. I know that my council passed a very long, complex motion this Wednesday, and 2 weeks before we did it, the region of Peel as well, and we're undertaking both here with the police board and at the City of Mississauga consultations with the Black community to really help us heal and listen to them so that they may guide us going forward, particularly on that issue of body-worn cameras. I would be remiss if I didn't send my sincere condolences to the Chowdhury family. and also the community in Malton that is also in a great deal of pain, and trying to understand how the health and wellness call led to such a tragedy. And of course, they want answers. And so as soon as we can get the investigation completed to provide answers to the family, I think that would be so helpful. I think everyone wants to better understand what happened. That said, Chief, this board, myself, have confidence in you. You know, I put a lot of faith and stock in you and your team. We helped you build this team. I know you're addressing all the issues that had been prevalent in Peel Police, and we really approve of the kinds of reforms you want to make, and that your willingness to embrace change and willingness to embrace police reforms. And from your statements this morning, when you spoke about reforming policing and focusing on not only community safety, but wellness and wellness protection as well. It's so important, as you said, to invest in youth, but also to invest in the root causes of crime. So we can help, as Nick had said as well, so we can better raise outstanding citizens and do our work with respect to prevention and education, less so about policing in the community and the root causes of violence, not only mental illness, addiction, homelessness, etc., are things we have to deal with as a society. Like all of you, not only has this board, but I too have received hundreds, maybe thousands of letters calling on us to defund police. And I know we're going to have those very fulsome discussions, but I think that it's not really defund policing the direction we should be going. Well, I know it's not. That's not the direction we should be going. We should be talking about reforming policing and allowing healthcare and wellness issues to be responded to by professional groups. That only makes sense, that the right group, the right social workers, psychologists, sociologists respond to the right kind of call that comes in. And it allows police to do what they do best, protect us and keep us safe in the community. So really, they're trying to say a lot here. Just that the COVID issue has really brought into focus a lot of inequities and a lot of challenges to communities, and many communities are in pain. And as a police board, it's incumbent on us to take those issues seriously and respond. So I know on all our behalf, we send condolences to the I'll say the name wrong, Chiasulo family, the Brampton family that tragically lost the mother and children, beautiful family, to the Chowdhury family, also experiencing a tremendous loss, and the Andre Campbell family that are also waiting for the results of their investigation, so they may put closure on what happened there as well. And to us, to give us inspiration and the strength to embrace the kinds of changes that we need to make, embrace the kinds of reforms we need to make, allow police to do what they do best, but allow people who are suffering in different ways to get the support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Just to touch that note, last Sunday, myself, I attended both the vigils for late the unfortunate accident happened not too far from where I live on Torbram and Countryside, where we lost 4 lives, and that really shook the entire community. I would say in Peel, more so in Caledon, and I got the opportunity to attend vigil with our officers from 21 Division at that location where that unfortunate accident happened. And at the same time, I got the opportunity to speak, pay my condolences to the family and friends. And at the same time, I thanked hardworking first responders, police, fire, and paramedics on behalf of our board for the credible work they are doing. And again, I want to thank on behalf of board to all our frontline officers who attended that scene. That was not something easy, I know. There's lots of sadness after that. I went to the Caledon celebrations of life as well, and I could see hundreds of people there. And our board, myself, we share the pain with people of Caledon. Again, last Wednesday, I got an invitation to attend a WebEx meeting early morning with Regional Councillor Jennifer Ernest, Joanna Downey, and Mayor Thompson. And from our place, I want to thank Deputy Mark Andrews, who attended. Caledon OPP Inspector Garant, he was there as well. Our CEO of Region Appeal and CEO of Town of Caledon was also on the call. And we discussed some general discussion about the challenges day by day, the traffic issues we are facing. And to be honest, to this board, and I can see three of our board colleagues, we are fortunate to have leaders from the Region Appeal, Mayor Crombie, Mayor Brown, and Regional Chair Unica. Of course, that's your advantage and your experience that you guys have more stats about what's happening in the region. And it was a learning, lots of learning for me as well when I was on the call. Again, on behalf of this board, I would like to pay my condolences to the 4 unfortunately lost lives. And I know Mayor Brown has spoken earlier, and he paid his tribute as lots of people share their condolences from Brampton, and community in Brampton gather at that incident on that evening, and hundreds. Again, with that, if no other announcement, I would like to move on to the next item. Mayor Brown, please go ahead.
I thought I was on the list as well.
I'm sorry, I did not realize.
Yeah, I just want to say, similarly to Mayor Crombie, we do live in a moment where there is, I believe, in Peel Region, zero tolerance for hate of any kind. You saw what happened with Islamophobia incidents. There's one at the Peel School Boards where a parent council chair lost his position. Even his employer dismissed him. And so whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's anti-Black racism, hate of any kind, I think we have zero tolerance for. I think one of the unique things happening in Canada is where there's some jurisdictions where people say there is no racism. I think in Canada, we've shown the maturity that we say, yes, there are systemic barriers, there are systemic racism, and we all need to look at it. And so we may feel that we're doing better than other jurisdictions, but I think part of the progressive nature of our country is we say, we understand there's inequities and we have to look at every institution we have. So just, I know, like Bonnie's doing with the city of Mississauga, we're doing in Brampton. We created an anti-Black racism unit at our city. And so I think the fact that we're doing this here at the Peel Police as well, that we already launched the diversity and inclusion audit, I think speaks to a willingness that we have. And anytime there is a tragedy or concerns by the public, we owe them the responsibility to look into it. And so, my heart goes out to the Muslim community in Mississauga that I know was shaken. I've had similar outpouring of concern with the incident in Brampton with the Black community. And so I know we've got a great chief of police, and we have so much confidence in you that you're going to be able to handle this. And you're already building a leadership team that is about change, that is about adapting new technologies, about doing things differently. And so I'm encouraged. But when it comes to mental health, and I'm going to repeat this again, I did this had this conversation at the regional council table to make us appreciate the scale of the task we have. And we talk about, the need to look at policing through a different lens. One of the things we're talking about is mental health. You know, that there is this awakening to the importance of doing things differently, recognizing the scale of mental health. 10 years ago, they would have said, oh, you know, it doesn't exist. 20 years ago, they may have shrugged it off and said that it wasn't applicable. But I think over the last few years, there's been a real maturity to understanding that you have to approach mental health differently, that you can't criminalize mental health. And so in 2019, we had 15,741 mental health related calls to the Peel Police, 15,000. So as much as a board, we celebrate the fact that we launched MCERT on January 13th, and we have the COAST program. It's peanuts. It's a drop in the bucket. There was 22,000 suicide attempts in 2019. And so as much as I think we express concern over the incidents that happened, we have to recognize this is the natural outcome when we haven't built up the proper response mechanisms. You know, the police officers that I've spoken to at events recognize that's not what they signed up for. You know, and again, I've heard frustration, you know, where police officers are spending 8 hours in a hospital waiting when they want to be out there doing their best to keep our community safe. And so I asked Chief Nish yesterday at Regional Council, 15,000 calls. What percent of these calls can we get back to? With the 15,000 mental health calls, what capacity do we have with COAST or MCERT to respond to these calls?
Yeah, thank you. And so again, before I answer it, and I've thought more about the answer from yesterday today, is just to reiterate that if there is mental illness in the community and somebody calls for help, the only legislated entity that has the ability to connect somebody to a hospital or is the police. And so fundamentally, under the Mental Health Act, although paramedics and fire often join us, it's us, and you can see the irony right from the start, is that we're the ones legislated to do that. So as a chief, you know, if somebody can find an alternative, we'll welcome that, you know, yesterday. So that being said, you're right. We did stand up a mobile crisis response team, and it is in the interim until we find those solutions or other systems can be bolstered. That's what we've got, but it's only 2 cars a day per shift. For 1.5 million people, we can't be everywhere. And we're roughly averaging 16 to 18 mental health calls a day, you know, and that fluctuates. And we can't have those people go to every one of them. That's the problem. And everybody should know that the partnership with Canadian Mental Health Association is amazing. It's amazing. We keep talking about the benefits of the program and what we're doing, but more advocacy needs to happen because the funding we got in order to do that just went to them in order to staff their end of it. We have taken our own resources off of shifts and platoons, which, you know, for me they're already stretched in order to support this because it's the right thing to do. But for us, for the board's awareness, that represents close to $750,000 operating costs a year for me to have officers paired up with those mental health crisis workers. You know, we don't have the funding stream from other entities or provincially, federally. We know that the province is looking at it. They've, you know, but as it stands, it only gets us 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And we, you know, and that's just in the interim till the dialogue around finding other alternatives really takes seed. So, you know, I think that answers sort of your question, maybe a little bit more fulsome.
Well, and I was going to say, I think what the chief said there is very important for us to understand as a board, and frankly, for those in public service to acknowledge. You know, he said advocacy. And reason I pull that out is he said we can only get to so many of these calls. The reality is we've given the tools to the police to get to a fraction of the calls, and then we act surprised when there's a tragedy. More tragedies will happen. More tragedies will happen if we don't give the police the tools to do their job. We don't give the chief the tools to do their job. And right now we're spending in Ontario more than we've ever spent on mental health in Ontario history. That's a fact. We're spending more on mental health than we've ever spent in our history, but that we're not spending it in policing. Think about that. At a time when there's more of the pie to access, we're not getting it. And actually, the one thing I have to highlight here is the COAST program. We originally anticipated that would be funded by the province. That's not being funded by the province. That changed. And so that's actually on the backs of property taxpayers that support the police budget. And so I think in these tragedies, we're going to need some collective advocacy to support our chief, to support the Peel Police and say, it's not fair. We need to give them the tools to properly respond to these very difficult, these very challenging circumstances. And I hope this moment in history where there's a real conversation is going to spark a fundamental change to the support that we have for policing when it comes to mental health. And so just like I underscored that at regional council, I wanted to make sure everyone on the board heard what we heard yesterday in regional council, to understand the police only have the ability to provide those MCERT or COAST responses to a fraction of the calls we get. Anyone that thinks that every single call, there's a mental health worker available and the police simply aren't using it, it isn't the case. We don't have that support, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure we get those tools to Chief Nish so that we can have that more appropriate response. Because I don't believe we should be criminalizing mental health. I believe we need the mental health worker there.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair,
Brown.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add to that because I think Mayor Brown is absolutely right, but I would go further, and I'm not sure that it should be police responding to mental health calls. I really don't know if that's true, and this is something that we need to have a deeper dive on and a further discussion on. I think the funding should come for different kinds of groups to go forward when it comes to a mental health care call or even an addiction call. There should be social workers or trained professionals, and I know that police do receive training to de-escalate mental health calls, etc. But I'm not sure it should be a policing call. And I think that's where we see the defund police letters coming in asking us to take that portion of the budget away. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm suggesting we take a better look at which is the appropriate body to respond to what call. And, to send in police officers when you're clearly having a mental health episode or an overdose, maybe they're not the right person to respond. Clearly in an overdose, it should be a paramedic, right? And in a mental health care case, perhaps it's a social worker. So these are, I think, these are discussions that police boards across Canada will be having. I think we will have to have it. I think maybe we need to have a full day session on what we're prepared to do, how we can move forward to address these issues. They're not one-offs anymore. They're happening. They're occurring more and more often. And it must change, right? It must change. It must be in the way that we reform policing to better reflect the issues that are so apparent in our society today, and many have been pre-existing and many have been exacerbated by COVID, but nonetheless, I think we need to change how we allocate our police resources so that police can be better respond to calls of community safety nature to protect us, to educate us, etc. But some of these other issues should be left to other groups, other professionals. It's my feeling.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Mr. Boughton, you are next, please.
Firstly, everything's been said. I agree 100%. And the protests and the reactions that we've seen from some of the communities, Mississauga and Brampton, indicate a level of frustration that, it starts because there's an incident or there's a death as a result of the response of the PRP. But there's such a high level of frustration going on, and I know even within this board with the SIU, it's totally out of our control. I know we can't do anything about it, but just imagine if one of your loved ones was involved in an incident with the police, and then they say, oh, it's a use of force, SIU, and then from that point on, crickets. There's nothing going on. Just imagine if it was your family member, and it goes on for months and months and months, and there's nothing that's reported because the SIU is struggling to get the witnesses to respond to them, the officers possibly that are involved, and the SIU doesn't release any information of any type about the investigation. And then Chief Nish and his team and us as a board are questioned as to what we're doing. The appearance for the general public is it's a cover-up that we're saying nothing because we're hiding something when we don't have anything to say. When it goes to SIU, Chief, you can't do anything, correct? It's an SIU, you're out of it. We as a board are out of it. We can't ask any questions. We can't make any statements. And the public looks at it and they feel that nothing is happening and that there is a cover-up going on. And that's a high level of frustration within the community. I know as a board, we can't do anything about it other than to voice our concern that SIU has to be more responsive and that the public has to have some confidence in that the job that they're doing is complete, that the investigation is complete, that it isn't biased, and that's reported in a timely fashion. And it certainly isn't that now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barton. Before we move to deputations, let's see if Deputy Oduardi's magic works or not. 1 minute video, Chief, if you can try. Sorry, Chief, Mr. Howell is there. My bad, Mr. Howell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's certainly I have to agree with everybody, particularly the mayor and her understanding, and we certainly have grief for all the victims that have happened. Mr. Chowdhury's incident is certainly very, very concerning. I think my position, and certainly what the chief said, we need to detask, not defund, and the mental health workers would certainly be helpful in these situations. I think the difficulty is, at what point do you decide you're going to send a mental health worker in? If we look at the Chowdhury incident in Malton, you could have a very dangerous incident you're sending a mental health worker into. Who do you make that decision with? At what point do the police decide that it's not a police incident, but a mental health worker incident? It's a dangerous situation from the call, and that if you don't have some police there to ascertain what the danger is and what level can be ascertained, you're not saving anything. You're always having the police there. And I just can't imagine how you could possibly make that decision without police being there. We can certainly detask them and have them stand by and hope that the mental health worker can handle it. But I think in this situation, I can't judge that. I hope we can all stand by and wait for the SIU's decision. It's the circumstances certainly are concerning, but all we can do is hope for the best and see what we can change. But very concerning, and I hope we can all be patient and look at the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Now, Mayor Crombie, you're next.
You know, I know we'll be addressing the deputations. We have a number, hundreds of letters, and we, I guess, are discussing that now. So I don't know what sequence you want to put this in, but I do have a question for the chief, actually, and Al Boynton was just referring to the SIU and, you know, the confidence we have in them to do the investigation. As you know, the Chowdhury family is looking for a public inquiry, and I really, I don't know. I think that's a provincial decision that a provincial inquiry be called, and I think the province will say an investigation is being done by the SIU. What about how long do we know? Do we have confidence? We have confidence. How long will the SIU investigation take? What about the possibility of a coroner's inquest? Will that occur? And also, you know, there are significant reforms to the SIU that have been proposed in Chief Justice Michael Tulloch's report. So I wonder if we support those as a board, and we would think about encouraging the province to implement them, because I think they're sitting on a shelf, and I think they would go a long way to helping the SIU reform. So I don't know how others feel about that. I don't know if that's a topic of discussion, and would like to hear from the chief about or from whomever these pleas and cries for answers that many of these families are calling for. How can they best receive their response, the answer to their questions in a more timely way. Obviously, a complete investigation has to be done, and is the SIU the right party to do it? Is this public inquiry an option? Is a coroner's inquest an option?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Chief, you can respond to it, and then if no further question, if you can play your video, please.
Thank you, and Your Worship, I know there was a lot of thoughts in those questions, but first thing, I guess we all are aware that the legislation now is under for the SIU. The mandate is to be independent and transparent. Yet we know that that is in question from the public. I've had multiple discussions with the SIU director, not just on the most recent incident, but several other SIU where they've invoked their mandates on expediency and communication. And I think the intersecting point is community interest, which we all agree. I, of course, are unable to speak to elements that are maybe slowing down the cadence of these investigations, but and the whole pretense of them being independent and being able to control the investigation and be is the same reason why I can't, I don't have any insight into it, right? It's it's built upon a separate institution that leads and directs the investigation. But I have had conversations. There are, as you know, Justice Tulloch's report, many recommendations that have come out. The new proposed COPS Act to replace the Police Services Act has recommendations in it, which are intended to, bring greater supports to the SIU so that they can accelerate investigations. Even the recommendation to call for, and Justice Tulloch's mandatory inquiries when there is death at the end of a police interaction. So those are all there, and we understand that the legislation may see some movement towards the end of the year. But in the interim, the concept of independent inquiries, like for example, a coroner's inquest usually occurs when there's been an in-custody death. That won't necessarily fit the nature of it, and we know those take many years. We do need to let the facts come to fruition through the SIU investigation. That needs to take its course before we can presume a next step. We would expect accountability and all sorts of processes. We don't have the systems in place to trigger that. I don't think the board does as well. I think I'd have to look to Sharon to see what's possible. Does the province? That's another conversation. But I think if you were to talk to the province, and not to speak for them, I think they're looking towards enhancements in the forthcoming legislation to sort of trigger some of those actions. So absent that, we know that in the absence of information, the space is filled with doubt, with questioning, criticism. We've done our best to make statements to be there possible, but again, we're not in a position to comment on the investigative elements. Even it prohibits me from speaking to you as a board on that too, right? So, and I don't have the answers myself, right? They have the dominant. SIU has a dominant ability to speak to the witnesses, and that doesn't come from us as a police entity at this point. But in time, we will, look forward to getting those answers to the public and the SIU, hopefully addressing them as well. With that said,
yep.
Sorry, Mr. Chada.
Coroner's inquest.
And the coroner's inquest, I think I'm looking to my team. Sharon, can you speak to that? I think.
Yes, Mayor, I would expect in virtually all circumstances where there's a fatality, either in custody or where there's a police officer involved, there would be a coroner's inquest. That would be expected to be delayed significantly. The process typically is that the SIU would run its course, and then if there's any charges that come out of the SIU's investigation, the inquest would be held off pending the final conclusion of any of those charges. So that would take a while. If the SIU concludes with no charges, a final report would be issued. And then at that point, the coroner would announce the decision to do an inquest. And I would expect there's a public interest here to have a public inquest, which would answer many of the family's questions and the public's questions. An inquest is probably the appropriate forum in this case, whereas inquiries tend to look at more larger systemic issues. I think in this case, I think certainly for the community and the family's questions surrounding this incident, an inquest would be aimed at answering those questions. And we would certainly participate in such an inquest to try and come up with recommendations to help avoid a situation like this in the first place, which is the mandate of the inquest.
And do we know how long typically SIU investigations run? Because I think in both cases with the D'Andre Campbell and the Ijaz Chowdhury family, they're looking for closure, they're looking for answers. And so what is the time frame typically of an SIU investigation? I know we don't know the facts. We don't know what happened. We're not there. We don't know what the officers were facing, and we know they do a tremendous job keeping our community safe. But nonetheless, tragedies occurred, and so the families want some assurances. They want to know what happened. So what is the time frame approximately that they can expect?
So there is a legislative time frame now, which has the SIU returning back to report, and it encourages, of course, expeditious investigations. It encourages, 120 days and to have a report at that point. Typically, what we actually see is anywhere from probably, I would say at a minimum, several months, anywhere up to over a year, we've seen investigations. And I think, again, because it's an independent body, it's really hard to predict where they would land. But obviously, I would imagine their explanation would be that the more thorough or complex an investigation would be, the longer it may take. So unfortunately, it's kind of a wait and see.
And Sharon, this process is a bit of a mystery to probably all of us. So certainly, in the case of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, would that investigation go ahead of the Chowdhury investigation, or would they be simultaneous, or how does that work?
So
clearly that's on the minds of Torontonians as well, and looking for answers.
Yeah, of course, and they would be simultaneous. I don't think, provided again, and it all falls into the SIU's resources as well, and what their resources are, how many investigators they have available at any given time. But certainly they would be conducting numerous investigations at the same time. Again, I couldn't speak to how they're prioritized. I would expect certainly the seriousness of the event and the public interest would likely probably be issues that would be considered in those prioritization decisions. But again, I can't speak for the SIU. I can say that some of the legislation that the province did consider for the COPS Act, as far as the SIU part, has been put into place in order to try and encourage the investigations to move along quicker. So we do hope that once we get out of the current pandemic situation, where probably resources are already stretched, that we'll see positive effects coming from that. But it really does, it depends on their resources more than anything.
So if there were reforms that either we as a city or Peel as a region with Mayor Brown, or we as a board wanted to see implemented, how would that be best presented to the government, from the board, from the cities, from the region, from the regional council, from this board, please? Because there are a number of recommendations that had been made that were not implemented.
I think the board is a vessel for that, certainly, and that would fall into the board's mandate of trying to ensure an adequate and effective police service, because this does affect how our operations run. At this time, the government continues. I expect it's probably been on hold now because of more pending urgent issues with the pandemic. However, the provincial government does have tables going on for the regulations. They're still working on all the regulations under the Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act. Those have not been drafted yet, and they're still working on it. So that is a potential space for the province to account for potential changes.
Yeah, for instance, finally, I'll put closure on this conversation, but I did have an opportunity to pay my respects to the widow and the grieving family, and they weren't sure if they could return to their home, their apartment, because of the investigation and how long they may be out of their home because of it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Crombie.
Ron, if I could just say one last comment, because Mayor Crombie referenced the Tulloch report, and this is something I just want to flag for the board that maybe at a future board meeting we want to do a motion of support. I know our chief has spoken about some of those elements before in the recommendations. It had all party support at Queen's Park. I know this well because when it was initiated, I was there. I spoke in favor of it. Justice Tulloch has actually practiced law in Peel Region. He gets our mosaic, and the tools that and the reforms that he suggested, I think would help policing in Ontario. So just when Bonnie talks about the importance of this report and these recommendations, it will help. It will help police. It'll help chiefs. It'll help faith in institutions. And if we can help that nudge those recommendations to be implemented, I think it would be helpful for Ontario.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Chief, finally, the video we all are waiting for.
Thank you. Anthony sent one of his fine IT support team over to
Let's
my
see.
office.
Let's see how.
Unmuted there.
How Deputy.
When I became Chief of Peel Regional Police last October, I did so with a mandate of change, to move this organization forward with the goal of better service to the community. I've since listened, observed, and now it's time to act. I want to take this opportunity to highlight some of the necessary steps we aim to take in order to accomplish this significant systemic organizational change. We are working on a multifaceted approach to create systemic change centered on human rights. We will have regular and active engagement with our community as we develop this process and the practices to ensure confidence in the work we do for the benefit of the entire community. We recognize that we have to rethink our roles and adjust. Working together will come in the form of many new initiatives. There's a need to be flexible and approach problems from a different perspective. We are embarking on a technology and innovation roadmap. This includes innovation that is people-focused, leveraging new partnerships, and design that allows us to achieve community safety and well-being. Relationships are the foundation of everything we do, and we're committed to accomplishing that through the foundation built upon the principles of community safety well-being as a model. That focuses on the needs of the community first, and the pillars of this are simply that it includes collaboration between multiple sectors, such as mental health and education, coming alongside of us to get the right services to the right people at the right time. This model of community policing here at Peel Regional Police is about to change. We'll be focused on the changing outcomes to reduce the demand for crisis response. This will be reflected in how we deal with priorities such as mental health and addictions, in relation to crime trends, such as intimate partner violence, property offenses, or violent crime. We will be changing our approach to that as well. Traffic and road safety will be bolstered through the enhanced strategic initiatives with municipal partners and other stakeholders, and our response to priority populations to mitigate risk for youth, to strengthen our service to the seniors, to the vulnerable, and other key populations will also be a new priority. These approaches will be community-based, data-driven, local solutions with collective outcomes. This is the heart of community safety and well-being. We are embarking on a journey of thoughtful and meaningful modifications to the service we provide you. I'm proud to lead this great organization of professionals forward. These changes will not happen in a day, but I'm committed to bringing the necessary focus as we look forward with the continued goal of keeping a safer community together.
Hopefully that wasn't 2 minutes of silence and you could hear it actually. But
Good job, Chief and Deputy already, finally.
thank you, Chair. And just a reminder, amidst the heavy discussions that we've had, I think it's important for us to continue to focus on the work at hand that we're embarking on. It's not, I'm not diminishing anything that's occurring right now, but it goes to show you the complex nature of our work, that we have some really big things ahead of us, and even more now than ever do we need to get there. So thank you very much for that opportunity, and Chair Chad, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. If no more question or any comments, let's move on to, I don't see any, yeah. So now we move on to deputations. Yeah, we will now move on to the section of the agenda that deals with the deputations. Obviously, as everyone can see in the agenda, we have received more deputation requests than we ever have. This is obviously an issue that matters to our community because of the large number of deputations received, and as they are all related to the objections of body-worn camera and the strong feeling from the deputants that the police budget should be reduced. All deputations are included in the agenda and in addition on our website. On behalf of my board colleagues, I want to thank all the individuals who took the time to submit their deputations. You have all been heard. Since board members as well as members of the public have had a chance to review all the deputations, I will turn the floor over to any board members that would like to provide any comments, although we have some discussions in the previous item more so related to this deputation section. Any members wishes to speak on any comment over these deputations, the floor is open.
So, Mr. Chairman, I assume that the deputants, many of whom are already watching, because I've seen briefly on Twitter, there's a lot of talk about the conversations we've been having, and I think we have been addressing some of their concerns. And, as we go through the budget, I know that the chief is very dedicated about reforming policing and modernizing and using more innovation. And there are lots of reforms that we will be considering going forward. It's nothing we're going to commit to right here and now, but as we go through the budget process, we will, and as we know more. I just wanted to go back once more to the SIU discussion. It's not fair for me to move a motion right now to say, let's write a letter of encouraging the provincial government support the recommendations in the Tulloch report, because I think there are board members that aren't familiar with the Tulloch report. So I will ask instead, give direction to Rob Serpe if we can have it circulated and then put on for a board discussion the kinds of possible reforms, and maybe that's just one possible route of reforming as SIU. Certainly in Toronto, Mayor Tory tabled a number of reforms, and I know his councillors previous to that tabled their own list of possible reforms. And so I think we need as a board to have that healthy conversation about reform and what we're prepared to do, and we can look at the examples that are already in the public domain with respect to change and reform that other jurisdictions are considering. So maybe I'll just ask for direction to put the Tulloch report and any other reforms that are being considered in other jurisdictions as a topic for discussion by this board at a subsequent meeting.
And I'd be happy to second that, Mayor Crombie.
Before we deal with this, so Rob, I have, if you can clear, I have another speaker on the list, Mr. Atia wants to speak. If you want us to take that as a motion, or we should just wait at the end.
I'm happy for it to be direction, but if we want to formalize it into a motion, that's fine. And I think Mr. Attia will probably speak to it as well.
Mr. Attia, you want to speak first, and then we'll seek some sort of directions and which way we can move forward.
Sure. I just wanted to share some personal thoughts. First of all, for all the people who submitted these deputations, I want to say thank you. And when I joined the board, I recall having a conversation with my family at the dinner table about carding. And there are a lot of different point of views. And I'm not someone who's ever been carded before. And although I had certain opinions on the issue, I was shocked to realize that there were members of my family who had been carded. Something I had not known about. And hearing their personal experiences deeply impacted, you know, my understanding of how, while certain policing practices or methods may be well intended, have an impact on the residents' appeal. And these deputations did the same thing to me, had the same type of impact. I've read all of them. And there are some very important messages and feelings and emotions and experiences that some residents of Peel have had. And I want the residents of Peel to know that as a board member, our board has been looking at policing from a very comprehensive point of view from the day I've been appointed and this new board took place. I mean, we are very focused on looking at the way policing is done, and you know, bringing Chief Nish to the team was a big step in that direction. Helping him build his leadership team is another big step. But there are many conversations that are happening on these issues, and so these experiences and this feedback in the deputations comes at a very important time, because our conversations are not starting with your deputations. They've started before, and they certainly will influence or will feed our point of views on these issues. And whether it be the technology, whether it be people talked about the militarization of police and these deputations, people talked about diversity. There's a lot of different messages that have come through, the defunding of police. These are discussions we're having, rest assured. At least for me, the deputations have resonated with me, and I want to thank you for taking the time. These were not short messages; they were long deputations that were written, many facts, and you know, to support your arguments. So I just want to say thank you. It meant a lot. It was a lot of deputations. It took a lot of time to read, but I think it was important that you've all done this. So thank you again.
So having said that, thank you, Vice Chair Attia. As Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown has already directed to Executive Director. So if no further conversation or any comment on this, I would like to move a motion to receive all these deputations. May I have a mover and a seconder, moved by Mr. Boughton, seconded by Vice Chair Attia. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Chair Chapta, I think we should stay, because I know it's not natural in a virtual setting. Normally people would have the opportunity to give their speech at the chambers. Is there a way to share these deputations so those that want to read them like we have on the board to make sure those voices and concerns are heard? I don't want anyone to think in this important moment where there is concern and disappointment that we're not listening to that frustration. And so can we put it up on our website, or can we, for the public that wants to hear it, is there some mechanism?
Sure, I'll have our Executive Director, Mr. Serpe, to speak on it. And Mr. Serpe, if you can speak, some of the member may felt that their deputation, if it's not included, if that was after the date of the submission, if you can please talk about that.
Sure. So, Mayor Brown, just so you're aware, all of the deputations that are that have been provided to the board are part of the public agenda. So they've all been posted on our website already under the agenda. Everyone that you have seen, that the board has seen, is also available for the public to view as well.
That's great. Maybe we should do a tweet as well, just or a post to let people know how to find it. And sometimes it can be confusing. So I'm happy to share. I'm sure Mayor Crombie is as well, because I think there's some pretty eloquent and a lot of heart went into these deputations. I want to make sure that we recognize that.
Okay. So the next, we already dealt with the new business, I believe. So now we move on to item number 9. Purchasing police analytics software solution. Chief, would you or someone on your team like to speak on this item?
Absolutely, and I think the next 2 items on the agenda are ones which Deputy O'Duarty will be addressing, very critical ones for us at this juncture. The item number 9 is, as I said earlier to you about the Moneyball comment, and just think back to the board commissioning me to do a service delivery review, which is in the near completion phases. In fact, I think we should have it for the board before the next meeting. But it's built upon the pretense of being able to look at what we do, quantify it, understand time spent, geography, data and analytics to make meaningful decisions or to inform our decisions on how we orient our delivery of service to the community and how we can be more better stewards or efficient with the resources we have. Is built upon intelligence and analytics. And I have to say, we are probably one of the last services of our size to have a fulsome back-end suite. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Anthony if I haven't already duplicated what he's about to say to you.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon now to the board members and through the chair. Thank you for giving me just a couple minutes to speak about this, and obviously happy to answer any questions relating to it. First, I want to say that really authentic human interaction and decency are really the foundations of community service and care. But innovation and technology does have a role to play to further that, to inform us, to inform the community, which we sometimes forget about when we talk about innovation and technology and policing, is that there are certain benefits for the community and self-serve options and potential for accessing information so that they can better understand the police as well as a two-way interaction. And so this is what we aim to do with specifically with number 9 here, is building our police analytics suite. And that's really providing and collating and analyzing data that the police service right now does an incredible job of doing. We have a tremendous amount of data within the police service. However, we are behind. And I would say that we are significantly behind other services in the country in terms of being able to gather our data and analyze it, and then providing it to our officers to make meaningful decisions on how they proactively distribute their time and how they meaningfully serve the community. And by doing that, and by being able to analyze data and provide this information, we can not only be more efficient and effective in our policing duties, but we can serve the community better. All that to say is that resources required for this are mainly based in expertise, and the software really is the second part of it. It's being able to get the expertise within our service and then relying on the data and the software that come along with it to be able to have an acceptable product, just not for within the service, but outside of the service. This request is so that we can accelerate our initiative to that. I would estimate us being about 5 years behind police services in terms of our analytics capabilities. And that's not something that's hard to choke down. It's hard to hear as a police executive within a police service, and I'm sure for you as the board, but this has been on the roadmap of the police, Peel Regional Police Service, and we need to accelerate it and accelerate it now. It provides us a platform for many other initiatives that we want to get off and running. It's sort of the cart before the horse scenario. We really need this to go first. And so barring any other questions or any specific questions from the board, I'd ask the recommendations to be accepted so that we move along our analytics suite and are able to provide the information both to our service, our partners, and the community relating to police operations.
Member, sorry, Vice Chair Aptia, please.
What is the timeline on implementation of this project? When will we begin to see the results of the data?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. And through the chair, really in the last few weeks that I've been here, I've met with our staff, our strategic initiative staff, specifically the person in charge of standing up our analytics, Mr. Tony Ventura. And we have made significant progress already on standing up the police analytics office. So this is really the hurdle that we need to overcome to obtain the expertise and the software. So to answer your question directly, once we start negotiating with the vendor who's tried, tested, and true in other large police services and have exactly what we're looking for, we can expect early results in fall and moving towards the new year to have a fulsome analytics suite. I will say it will take about a year for us to lead in terms of having innovative analytics suite. So we're not looking here just to catch up. I'm looking to leap above and beyond, and that we're looking at about a year's timeline for that. But we will be up and running by fall. We'll have good, meaningful information and analytics by end of year, and we will advance this program significantly by this time next year with some extremely interesting initiatives.
To follow up, just an idea to take back. Maybe if you can work with Rob to think about some dashboards that are relevant to the mandate of the board, that so the board can also, in our decision making throughout the year, can benefit from this technology.
Thank you, Mr. Attia. And just a couple that I have a slide presentation for our next topic. I think that touches on that. That is absolutely the intention, not just within police analytics, but when we start talking about broader initiatives, our digital evidence management strategy, all these things will inform some of the board priorities, and most importantly, we'll collaborate with the community on what they want to see from policing and information they want to see from policing. So thank you for asking that. I should have mentioned that in my remarks.
Thank you, Deputy Oduardi. Any other comment, question, concern? If not, then looking for a mover and seconder. Moved by Mr. Howell, seconded by Mr. Boughton. All in favor? Carried. The next item is item number 10, provisions of body-worn camera solution for Peel Regional Police 2020-517N. Chief, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Chair Chada. And as Anthony will move through information slide deck, which is an important introduction to SEED before the board makes any decisions. This is an important discussion point. One, as a police leader who in my previous organization was on the front end of discussing these type of technologies and the ecosystem around it. It's not new to our sector. It's been analyzed, discussed, studied extensively. And we need to say it's, as Anthony will speak to, is not the panacea, but it's a means to an end, which is an enabler for us to deliver a platform of services to the community. So with that, I think, Anthony, are you prepared to just open it up with some information?
I am, and I'll share a screen shortly, but to Mr. Attia's point, and to the entire board's point, I read each of the deputations, and it is not lost on me that the interpretation of what body-worn cameras could mean for policing in our communities, whether it's relevant or not. And so I just want to take a moment and opportunity to say that really this is less about body-worn camera, and it's about a back-end system that enables certain technologies. And I'd like to take just a couple minutes to review an information deck. If you would let me, I'll share my screen, and perhaps it'll inform the conversation just a little bit more. And I'm hoping you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. So really, just to reframe the conversation, this is what we're really talking about here, less about body-worn camera, and it's more about our digital evidence management strategy. And the reason I speak to this is because the digital evidence management strategy enables certain technologies that are on or will be on the roadmap for PRPS. And even before I get into the digital evidence management strategy, what I really need to let the board know and our community know is that we are embarking in the next 4 to 6 weeks on outlining what our roadmap is for innovation and technology within the police service. It's not just about buying big, shiny new items that have expensive price tags and yet may be ineffective for police. It's really defining what will impact the community as best it can and what will provide better care and service, as I've mentioned earlier. So the screen that you see before you is really just high-level thoughts that police agencies of Canada have thought about when they put together their strategic roadmap on innovation and technology. And of course, what's highlighted there, and I've highlighted for you in the screen, is the enhanced collection, management, and storage of data. And I can tell you that much like our analytics suite, we are behind here in being able to get our arms around the amount of data that we have and properly process it. And without this platform, without a digital evidence management platform, we are unable to move forward even with body-worn camera or other initiatives. And I'll explain that just a little bit more to you. You'll see that the digital evidence management system really is what we are recommending today to invest in, is really a foundation for all other technological initiatives. Be it body-worn camera, be it CCTV cameras, I'll speak about in a moment, if it's in-car camera, whether it's a rollout of smart devices to our officers, our crime scene images, and we call those unstructured data. We also have structured data, which is what our records management system is, and our computer-aided dispatch, where we dispatch our officers. It's really being able to put our arms around all this sort of data and being able to use it effectively. And current day, we are not able to do that. So the key benefits are really modernizing. And there's some controversy around the word modernizing. It's enhancing our ability. But when we're starting right now at 0, I would say we really need to advance this by a few years. It provides us a single platform, and this is very crucial. Instead of bouncing between different silos of information, it allows us to put our arms around all the information. And this is where we're more effectively able to store it and secure it and process it. And this includes not only body-worn cameras, but upcoming initiatives like NG911. And I know that's been pushed back because of COVID, but we require a DEMS to move forward on NG911, which, as you all know, is the ability to receive 911 calls via data sources. And it really helps us reduce the amount of time officers spend trying to analyze the data and their work, and more time spent proactively focusing on their communities. I won't go through every point, but we can reduce costs associated with some of our antiquated system here, our legacy systems, and really invest in more modern systems and efficiencies in processing. And it will really accelerate our analytical performance, especially given the consent right now to move forward with our analytics suite. One thing I want to highlight to you about a DEM system is it really enhances the interoperability. both internally within our own police service, but externally within our partners here at the region, other police services, Ontario Human Rights Commissions, all these different types of agencies will be able to access a single platform. So I don't want to confuse anyone with this, but I talked about our structured and unstructured data. These are just some examples. I could fill up a screen with 20 or 30 sets of data sets here within the Peel Regional Police and how it flows through our infrastructure, some antiquated, some not, and then how we're able to secure and collate that data. And by moving forward with identifying a digital evidence management system and enacting it right away, we're able to move forward some of these initiatives. It really is the foundation of moving forward with specific items like body worn or in-car or even CCTV cameras. This really brings us to the topic about the cameras, and not just body worn cameras, but there's different utilization of cameras within the service. These are three named above. It's body worn, in-car, and CCTV cameras, all three of which are on the PRP roadmap at some point. But there's an acknowledgement, and as we've seen in the deputations, that, and we agree that body worn cameras or in-car camera cannot be solely relied upon to improve trust and transparency and relationships within the community. I harken back to what I said earlier. This is based on
I don't speak French, I'm sorry.
Interaction. I'm sorry?
For my behalf, I apologize.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. But there are some benefits for camera systems. And what we want to do here is not just rely on the camera system in the traditional sense of being an accountability mechanism, but it's to take that camera and be innovative with it. Go beyond what police agencies are doing right now with cameras, is using it as a two-way communication device and looking at the potential for a camera to inform police decisions, whether it's responding to or at an incident. So you can imagine that if we used it for an innovative services, we could have remote real-time mental health assessment. As we go through the discussion of whether or not that should even be within the realm of policing, we know that it does provide us opportunity and enhancements. It could enhance language services. We could have someone at the other end of an incident sitting in our real-time operations service. And as the chief likes to envision it, going through a Rolodex of services and providing that real-time information to those in crisis or those in need. And we can integrate it with our analytics suite and enhance response and training. It's simply not just a recording tool. And as we talk about, and the chief mentioned earlier, it's not a panacea for public trust. It does, though, however, document police interactions and does provide, we can expedite the amount of information to the SIU, OOIPRD, and professional standards to aid in investigations. And hopefully that could speed some of the investigative processes. It'll highlight the good work of the PRP members, and policy and process will be formed around the compliance and deployment piece, which I know Mayor Crombie was a question of yours in a meeting some time ago. Again, I won't dwell on the evidence and database. I think they're self-explanatory. But if you look to the bottom, our head Crown attorney here in Peel welcomes the use of body-worn camera and in-car camera systems for the court process. Has many benefits, not just in terms of early resolution, but demonstrating the evidence at hand. And of course, there's training application to this. Capturing real-time actions of police, citizen, community interactions can benefit police, community, future interactions. So really, digital evidence management is a foundation of what we're talking about today. It's not just a single pillar of body-worn camera, but encompasses all our technological initiatives that we will have on our roadmap. So today we're asking for the ability to further our negotiations and look at an appropriate digital evidence management solution.
Thank you, Anthony. And Chair Chad, I will turn it back to you.
Okay, I can still see the screen. Yes, this looks.
Sorry, Chair Chad, I just
Sure.
want to mention in the chief's previous video and not being able to get that on screen, it looks like it was user error. Just wanted to.
Okay, we have Mayor Brown. I can see his hand, and Vice Chair Atia's hand after Mayor Crombie, then Mr. Boughton, and then Mr. Howell. And I don't see Nando, but maybe he'll be there soon. But anyway, back to the business. We have Mayor Brown on this item, please.
Okay, I'd be happy to put forward the recommendation for number 10, and I suspect Mayor Crombie would be interested in seconding that as well. One of the reasons that we were so eager to see this moved and why we brought it up at the last board meeting is I believe this is a great step to help build faith in our institutions. I believe transparency protects the good, it exposes the bad, it creates accountability. This has been implemented in Calgary with success. I know Toronto's had a successful pilot project, and to have a progressive chief like we do, who is always on the cutting edge of technology, I certainly think Peel should lead here. In that presentation, I think speaks to the many positive attributes. And so I just want to say I'm really encouraged by how quickly the leadership team put this all together. It was only a few weeks ago that we were talking about this. And I think it also goes to show a lot of people who have expressed frustrations with our institutions, were worried that there'd just be protest in the moment would be lost. I think when you see tangible action like this, it speaks to the fact that we're actually moving the yardstick forward and creating accountability, creating transparency. And so just really happy to see how quickly, Chief Nish, that you're able to move on this. And I think this is going to be a positive addition to policing in Peel Region.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, next person to speak on this is Vice Chair Atia.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, actually two questions. The first is, we've been talking about this technology for some time now. And when I read through some of the deputations, there's that concern, like if we invest all this, this money to do what we believe is an important step forward for Peel Police, and then there's an incident where the camera's turned off, right? And where we should offer public confidence, people talk about the deputations where there are, other examples where when you need the camera, it's turned off. So how does this solution, and how do you envision the process that is implemented, ensure that these cameras, actually do what they're supposed to do? That's my first question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Etienne, through the chair. It's an excellent question. It revolves around really two concepts in camera systems and policing. One is compliance of the officers, which is built around good fundamental training and policy, which requires officers to have camera operating in certain circumstances. And mainly it's interaction with the public. The second is the automation of those cameras in some certain circumstances. And depending on what the technology is, whether it's, as we know, CCTV cameras are a little different. It constantly loops and records and buffers. And with in-car camera system and body-worn camera systems, there's certain artificial intelligence and automation that can be applied to trigger the camera to be activated, regardless of an officer's intentions to activate it or not, or to stop it. And so we have to work through what those are, whether they fit into the scope of the body-worn camera and or in-car camera system. And one thing I forgot to mention, Mr. T, is that I'm simply not asking for a blanket authority just to implement this. I am asking to come back and report to the board on some of those specific items around governance and policy related to those things. So as we look to get more information on that, we can certainly provide you much more detail on those exact instances.
My other question is, you know, as you leverage technology, you create data. I mean, it's the data at the end of the day that's what we need. And as the data grows, you know, you have this engine that you talked about, like under all the technologies of that DEM. There's a lot of resources required to actually manage that data and leverage it and use it. So what about the staffing perspective? How does this technology impact the skills and the staffing? Does it, you know, does that exist already? Are we going to need to hire more people to support this technology from the back end perspective?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The soft costs associated with the implementation of a digital evidence management system, the theory is it's supposed to reduce costs, and that picking the platform, the most cost-effective platform, automation does that for you. But certainly there's no illusion that we will have to support this through human resources within the service. And again, my ask is to fully understand that what we have is that I'm trying to understand the amount of data that we have and what the requirements will be. So a more fulsome report around those soft costs and the human resources to support that will be forthcoming. Again, the underlying message about digital evidence management is that regardless of body-worn camera, whether it's implemented or deployed, the service is in dire need of a digital evidence management system to get their arms around all the silos of different data sets that we have today. And without this, we can't do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next we have Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. Anthony, right? So what's the timeline you're proposing?
Well, we're heading into the summer season. We know that we can certainly, I'll be here. We know that certainly we can begin those discussions immediately with the vendor. We could have a framework together in short order. I would say a framework to come back to the board within a month of what it is exactly that we're looking at. And then if we were to progress to the next step, I would say that the earliest implementation date is you're looking at very late fall or something like this, and that's pushing it. And
I
that's
just want to
it's a body-worn and DEM solution. The digital evidence management system we would work on right away.
Right. I just want to remind everyone we are in consultation with the Black community on their feedback and consulting with them on this. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse either. We're still in a listening phase. Certainly, the question I wanted to ask yourself, Anthony, or the chief, is that, Deputy, would these cameras have helped in the situations of Dondre Campbell or Ijaz Chowdhury? Do you think that that would help us get to the bottom of the truth sooner, and would they have given us evidence?
Your worship, I'll comment before Anthony, but as you know, these systems and processes like the SAU inquiry, or say if it wasn't even an SAU matter, but one that we had to present to the courts, our job and the job of the SAU is to obtain the facts, as much information as possible to inform a decision. Having video is a key accelerator to that, and it is one of a variety of different pieces of information that formulate decision making. So, in the absence of it, you're depending on human information, right? Which in some cases aren't all there, or there's not enough of them, or perhaps there's disparity and there's challenges with that element. So if you add it to the totality of evidence that you could provide in information, it certainly expedites the information process. So that's not I'm not trying to be convoluted, but I'm just saying that it's not the sole answer, but it is absolutely one which we can say it wasn't us as a human uniformed officer saying it. It's not the citizen or the person affected. It's almost a third party piece of evidence collection that we can add to it. And Anthony, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that.
No, I think exactly. One of the analogies I use all the time about the camera in the first-hand account, and I've worked armed robbery section for quite a while, is that, in speaking with a victim after an armed robbery and witnesses, you could ask a series of people about the events, and somebody will say, well, the person was wearing a red shirt, a blue shirt, a gray shirt, and all in the same single event. Whereas when we relied on the camera, it gave us the accurate first account, of course, and for the duration. So that would be the first part of the answer. I want to go back to something you said, and I missed, obviously, to inform the board, is that our process for enabling a digital evidence management strategy or system and or body-worn camera system is intended to be collaborative with the community. We will engage the community in Peel Region as to how they want to see this deployed entirely within the region. And I think it's important that anytime we introduce a technology and innovation in policing, that we look to our communities to inform that. And I'm sorry I missed that, Mayor Crombie, but it was an important piece to get through.
I guess the final question will be on, on the budget and how will it fit into our budget? And we're in a $2 million deficit today. The region's in a deficit. The cities are in massive deficit. Is this the right thing to do going forward to make this kind of large capital investment? And when we're going to go through a period of austerity and probably cuts to programs and services.
Mayor, I can offer some information on that. The digital evidence management system capital budget has been in place for some time, along with a video recording budget. Those have been budgeted for already, and they will at this time not impact the operating budget for this year and next year. As we move forward, there may be operational costs in terms of evergreening and upkeeping the system. And again, to understand what that is like, I will need more time to speak with the appropriate vendors.
Mayor Crombie, thank you. I have Mr. Attia, I'll come back to you. Please hold your thought because I have next to Mr. Belton in the line, then Mr. Howell, and then back to Mr. Attia.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Chief Nish and Deputy Chief Anthony, thank you for answering all my dumb questions a couple of weeks ago, and we got to spend some time together to go over the DEMS and the BWCs and all that, and I appreciate your patience in it. I just think it's outstanding. It's a great step forward, and I think will help to build some confidence in the community. One of the things that that we talked about was the ability for presenting evidence and speeding the process of if there's charges involved by using the BWCs and submitting that evidence, because it doesn't become subjective where an officer is taking notes from a pad and all that. And so I'm asking you, will that help to speed the process of trial? Because we have that. That's number one, and not for you, Anthony, but one of the things I found disconcerting under Section 2 of our package is that every one of the depositions that we have received about defunding the police and all that, 100% of those depositions is opposed to having body-worn cameras, and I don't understand that, because I think it's to the benefit of the police force. I know that the PRPA is on side with this, and I know Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown are big advocates for this, but I don't understand why all these depositions are against it when I think it's great. So perhaps, Anthony, you could ask the question on, or answer the question relative to using this for the presenting of evidence for speeding the judicial process, and for the rest of the board, I don't understand why the depositions are against it.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Boughton. Our Crown Attorney is absolutely in favor of implementing, when we talk about specifically about body-worn camera and/or in-car camera systems, due to the fact that it gives the best evidence. And it does add to not only the facts and evidence, but it adds to early resolution. And that is one of the true metrics that have come out with studies in terms of camera systems, including in-car camera systems for traffic violations, where not only does it demonstrate to defendants prior to traffic court relating to the offenses, but it also has a demonstration of interaction and can lead to a reduction in complaints. So I would say that it would be welcomed here from both our provincial offenses and our criminal justice partners.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm just asking the rest of the board or anybody to make a comment relative to the objections of these. And it seems that a lot of people in the public don't want it. I don't get that. To me, it's such a logical step, but I don't understand why 100% of them don't want it. So I don't know if there's an answer. I'm just throwing that out there.
Mr. Bowden, we are well aware that, just to take a step back from body-worn cameras and not to diminish, the voice that doesn't believe it's the solution for accountability. Clearly, it's another piece in transparency, but yes, it's not the solution for accountability. So I think generally those that are not in favor of it are not in favor of it because they believe that it's not going to provide true accountability. And as you can see from what Anthony went through, it's a myriad of different things that we have vacillated on for the last 10 years in the police community, talking about, researching, looking at academics. And it's just, I've used this analogy before as just another tool that should just be in the mix. The second part is, if you look at it attached to the broader defund narrative, it's just seen as an expense to undertake when people want us to not have funds. So I think, those two things are attached together. I'm not minimizing the body cam discussion, but it could have been us acquiring another asset that they would not be in favor of us moving forward with, because it's counterintuitive to the idea of let's take the dollars out of here. And you and I know, now's the time to not egress into a strict law enforcement role. That's the opposite right now that we need to be doing. And I think Anthony appropriately, and I got to give him and his team the credit for pulling this together, is that we're really trying to change the discussion to what can you do from an infrastructure and a back-end support to make us more effective for the people we serve, to be more responsive, to change our service delivery where it's needed, and to, again, as you heard me say even this morning or even at regional council, is to change outcomes. And being thoughtful about our activities which have an impact on outcomes is really what that is. And if you would go back to the two slides which capture some of the outcomes, not all of them, I think we know that that's a difficult thing for the public to digest, especially when in the current environment. So not that you're asking for my assessment, Mr. Boughton, but that's sort of my take, and it may not be the fulsome one, but thought I would.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's great. Well, just, and maybe this is for Sharon and not for you, Chief, that if an incident, a use of force, and there was a subject officer, and the subject officer is wearing a BWC, does that mean that that under SIU or because of the collective agreement, that BWC and all that data then would be available for SIU, or could the PRPA or the officer itself prevent that video from going to the SIU? And maybe that's a question for Sharon. Maybe I'm at the wrong level in asking this, but that would be a concern, because in SIU, the officer doesn't have to speak to SIU if they don't want to, correct? And then, so what would happen with the BWC? And maybe Sharon, that's to you or somebody smarter than me.
Sure. I think that's certainly a legal issue that has been hashed out in other services who have had these pilot programs in place. So it's certainly something that has been considered. Obviously, the question is, does the camera footage equal notes? Because there is a difference between camera and notes. This is one of a number of issues that certainly would have to be clear in our directives prior to having anything implemented. And I think working with legal and the deputy and our training units, we would have all of these issues ensured that it's clarified in our directives before they're ever headed out with the cameras. But certainly, I mean, that's definitely one of the main issues. And I know that when Toronto was creating their pilot program, they did work with the SIU and the Privacy Commissioner to come up with answers to those issues. So, luckily for us, a lot of the legwork is done, but it is something that would require, I think, further consultation with our association to get the right directives in place.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, sorry, there was a bit problem in connection. If we already done with this comment, the next we have Mr. Howell to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly can agree with Mr. Bowden's comments, and to further his question about, is this a common feeling amongst the public? I suspect our deputations have some common element or source to them, and I don't think they're the general attitude of the public from what I've heard. And further to that, I would suggest that if you look at all the complaints, or many of them that have come from down south, many of those were from videos that were caught by the public on their own cell phones. So I cannot imagine a better source to protect the public than video cameras, where there's any question, as the instance we've faced in our own area. We'd have instant video, and can there be any better indication of what's happened in an instant? Pretty hard to question what happens on film, where who was standing where or who did what, when you have a video of it. And I think it would be hugely beneficial to the collection of evidence as well, to help an officer a year or two later when he can look at a video and be absolutely sure of how the incident happened. I could not be more supportive of the body cameras. I cannot imagine anything that protects everybody, not just the public, but the officer and the truth and victims of crimes. There could not be a better source of evidence to help us out in there. The only question I would have, the Deputy Chief, it would be, can we confirm the costing on this, just in regards to Mayor Crombie's question? I look at your page number 8, I see 1.4 million. Is that accurate for all included, everything all in? Do we have any big surprises there? There could be significantly more than that.
That's the budget total allotted to the program. I would need some time to speak with the vendor to get a more fulsome and accurate amount and report that back to the board.
I understand that, just as long as it's not a significant change. I think the other concern was the actual storage of data. I understand that's a significant part of the cost. do we actually own the data, or is it maintained by the vendor? I think the concern there would be we can end up in a marriage with the supplier, and we can always be stuck with having to renew with him because he owns the data. And 5 years down the road, it's pretty hard to go with someone else when he's got storage of all our data. And my second question, just in regard to that, the privacy of the officers, when an officer is having, if the camera I assume was always on, he's having private comments with other officers, nobody's perfect. Are they safe in having a reasonable sense of privacy in instances that have nothing to do with any report or incident?
Thank you, Mr. Howland. Through the chair, we own the data, certainly. Make no mistake, the vendors are in the market to make money on storing it and analyzing it and providing those services for us. That information needs to be fleshed out, certainly some more as I report back to you, and I will do that. In terms of the privacy, we know that I've read several privacy impact assessments on both body-worn cameras and in-car camera systems, which are for and allow this, with the strict adherence to redaction policies that we will be adhering to here, so that yes, we can ensure the anonymity of those who are not involved. There's also a benefit, and of course, we don't want to get too granular into this in terms of when we just, not just body worn, but when we talk about CCTV camera, technology has come a long way. And again, here at PRP, my vision isn't just to capture images. My vision and the chief's vision is to innovate past that and look for opportunities to analyze footage within the confines and within the parameters of privacy, to assist Deputy Chief Milinovich and his team in solving crime that perhaps would have otherwise been unleft. So the totality of my answer to you is that we can ensure the anonymity of those who are not involved but captured, and certainly that is one of our measures to ensure that we abide by and employ.
On a regular, ongoing basis, would there be anybody reviewing the footage of the cameras if there was no incident with that officer during that day?
There would be certainly an audit function, as we have in many other processes within our service, to ensure that the service and the quality of service we provide is met, and that would be one of, in fact, the benefits of having this.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Back to Mr. Atia. You raised your hand earlier. You still have a question, or someone asked that already?
No, I just a couple comments and some questions. I mean, I have no doubt that there's a significant benefit to the public and to our members, police members, in implementing this technology. Like in the work that I do, in the human rights work that I do, whether it be with, reporting on human rights issues or taking issues to the International Criminal Court and these types of things, these videos, they play a major role in understanding what happens on the ground. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, in the modern times that we live, that all these social media videos that the public takes whenever there's an incident, they offer calls, they offer support to when the public calls for accountability or transparency. And those videos play an important role in understanding. And the problem is, I can imagine in the police service or in the, from a legal perspective, understanding the reliability or the source or the of these videos that the public takes is an obstacle to leveraging that information, that data, and so having our own technology and data that we can rely on that tells exactly what happened in that incident is fundamental to understanding the truth for everyone's benefit. And the last thing that I would want in implementing this technology, just to kind of echo what's been said by the other board members, is any type of limitation or restriction where we would find ourselves telling the public we can't use the video for this purpose, right? And so as you develop the policies around this technology before even going forward, as a board member, I want to feel assured that there isn't going to become some privacy issue or some, some internal, whatever it is that one day we have to tell the public this video cannot be used to tell you what happened. So those are just some of the comments that I have. In terms of question, I see in your proposal, you've already kind of leaning towards a certain vendor. Does that mean that we've done the due diligence to ensure that other vendors in Canada or anywhere else do not offer better technology? Can you just give us a bit more context as to why we're, have already decided to lean towards Axon? And also, are you asking us today to move forward and approve you signing a contract with this vendor?
Thank you for the comments, and through the chair, I'll address your question. We have done a environmental scan on agencies that have utilized a digital evidence management system, not just here in the province of Ontario, but throughout Canada. Like agencies, we use Calgary Police Service in the demonstration as not a like for like agency, but being similar in terms of size and deployment. And we see the progress that that vendor has made throughout the country and internationally. And we find that it best suits our system right now. We're not asking to sign a contract with that vendor today. We're asking to look into more information and report back to the board on what that will look like before we move forward.
And just my follow-up questions to this, Deputy Eduardi, how long will be looking this time, like monitor or just a trial if we are not signing?
I'm sorry, Chair, could you just repeat your question? You cut out there a little bit.
Sorry, you just mentioned that we'll be getting more information and we are not signing. How long this time period will be roughly?
I'm thinking about 30 days for us to have more fulsome and detailed information. In fact, my team will be on it as of this afternoon. To be quite honest with you, the digital evidence management system is a priority for the service. And to be quite frank, one that is handcuffing me right now, not just on this issue, but on other technological advancements that the service needs to move forward with to get us up to par and to deliver on expectations for our community.
Thank you. Any other question, comment by any other board member? I guess we have quite a bit of discussion. We already, in the last meeting and after and today, we were already kind of gave lots of thoughts. So if no further question, I would like to move on with this. I guess we already have the mover and seconder for this as indicated by Mayor Brown and Mayor Crombie, because that's what Mayor Brown, you would like to move, and Mayor Crombie, you would like to second? Okay, so all in favor? Carried. This is approved. Now
Thank you,
we
Chair.
have, thank you. Anyone wishes to say anything? No, all good. This concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. Thank you all for your patience as we navigate through today's virtual meeting. Please stay safe, everyone. We will adjourn for 5 minutes and then we will move through the Zoom conferencing. Once again, I would like to thank all our staff who assist us today to putting together this second virtual meeting, including our executive director and Lorena, Luca, and my apologies if I miss anybody else's name. Again, thank you, and can't wait to meet everyone in person meeting, not the virtual meeting, but till we will see in our next virtual meeting. And there will be adjournment for 5 minutes and then we will come back into the in camera. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend.